Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Last week was a wild week of economic news, and no one can break it down better than our friend Steve Moore. He's joining us on KCMO Talk Radio, former economic advisor to the President of the United States, also now a host of a nationally syndicated radio show that airs Saturday afternoons at 2 here on KCMO. That's More Money with Steve Moore joining us on 95.7 FM. So, Steve, as people see all these different stories and these headlines about the economy and what happened last week, what is the biggest takeaway for you out of last week's rash of economic news?
Well, it's all good news. It's really good news. I mean, we got a very good jobs report and we got a very good inflation report. And those are two of the most important statistics that we report every month. And both of them showed, the one showed an increase in employment, which was really a solid number. Firms are hiring. And the other report showed that inflation has fallen to about 2.5%. Now, that's still above where we want it. We want it down to less than 2%, but the direction is good. And that means every time, obviously, the inflation rate falls, that means people's affordability goes up. And, you know, that's the buzzword these days about affordability. But when you have real wage gains and lower inflation, that's a good sign for American families.
So with that being the case, then, do you see going forward the Fed holding interest rates where they're at with the jobs numbers coming in above expectations and inflation still being maybe a little higher than is ideal, but also coming down?
Well, look, I think that there probably will be one or two rate cuts coming starting in maybe soon or maybe in the early summer. But I also believe that the media and Wall Street way over obsess about Fed rate cuts. I mean, the Fed can't create, and its number one job is to keep stable and make sure that we don't have runaway inflation. So I'm all for rate cuts, but I also don't, by the way, when the Fed reduces rates, what that does is frees up money and puts more money into the economy. Now, in the short term, that can be a good thing, but what is inflation? Inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. So we want to make sure with the rate cuts that we're not inflaming and igniting new inflation. So I would go slow if I were the new Fed chairman. And by the way, I think Kevin Warsh is awesome. I think he was an excellent pick. I think he will stabilize the dollar. I think he will keep inflation under check, and I think he will contribute to what is now looking like a Trump economic boom.
All right, so let me ask you this then, Steve. I don't want to poo-poo anything, but the one thing I saw last week that maybe wasn't the best news was the fact that the 2025 jobs numbers as a whole got revised down by 1 million jobs. So what is that all about, and why is this? I mean, we're excited about this January report, but honestly, I don't know what to believe when last year's numbers dropped by 1 million.
Well, we overestimated last year, but the good news for this year is that the signs are improving. And so you're right, there was a big downward revision. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. I haven't, I've seen the same statistic that you have, and we're all scratching our head kind of what happened. And one of the things that's been happening is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics that puts out this data, they've had a pattern of overestimating job creation, especially in the Biden era. So we'll see. But the good news is the unemployment rate fell, wages rose, and the number of people working rose. So that all points to me like the beginning stage of a real economic boom. I mean, look, gas prices are low today. You've got all-time high on the stock market. You've got a good jobs report. It's hard, in other words, it's hard to find too much to complain about, especially as inflation continues to tick down.
Is there any concern for you? And I want to get to the federal jobs numbers that are down 300,000 over the last few months. The private sector growth, heavily driven by healthcare, which is almost a government adjacent industry at this point. What's because I see that every year or every month I look at where the job's coming from. It's healthcare. How much concern do you have over that?
Yeah, that's not the prime industry we want to see growing. I mean, the good news, by the way, is the private sector employment is growing and government employment is falling. I mean, I was just writing a column yesterday about this, that's exactly the opposite of what we saw under Biden. Remember when we report, 150,000 jobs were created. 80,000 of them were government jobs. So, government jobs are negative for the economy, not positive for the economy, especially when you're running a $2 trillion deficit. So the trend is not just good in terms of the total number of people working, but the fact that we're shifting. It's almost like a paradigm shift under Trump, where we're draining the swamp in Washington, which is something I've waited a long time to see. And so less people are being employed in Washington, D.C., and more people are being employed in Kansas City and in St. Louis and Chicago and all over the country.
All right. So with that, the federal jobs down 300,000. You're right there. You're in the heart of D.C. How big of a deal and a game changer is this? Not just for, obviously you're going to notice it more in D.C. than we will in Kansas City, but explain to us in Kansas City why this matters and how this can impact things going forward for the country.
Because, we have something like 2 million government workers, federal government workers, and that is extremely expensive. It drives up costs. What we want is an economy that's driven by private sector growth, construction, manufacturing, technology, engineering, all of that to be important. When you have a government person working for a job, you have to hire 3 or 4 private sector workers just to pay their salary. Right. So with their taxes. So when you've got a government that's running a $1.8 trillion deficit, one good way of bringing that deficit down is to downsize Washington. And that's exactly what Trump is doing. And look, I live in the swamp, so I see it. And, but guess what? People are moving out of government jobs into private sector jobs, which is exactly what we wanted for a long time.
Steve Moore is here on KCMO Talk Radio. So are you going to, in your estimation, you think notice some differences around there, whether it's, real estate, people moving, people coming and going? Is that going to be noticeable there or not necessarily?
Well, hopefully, I think it would be a good thing if Washington, D.C. Returned to being a sleepy southern town, which it was 50 years ago, until the big government boom. But look, the most important thing you haven't asked me about, Pete, and that is artificial intelligence and robotics and the technology age and how that's the real issue here. I was just reading a report yesterday. I mean, this is coming so rapidly. The fact that robots are going to start doing factory jobs, they're going to start doing construction jobs, they're going to start driving trucks. Computers and robots and artificial intelligence are so changing and such a rapid pace that I just wonder whether Americans are ready for this. But, I was just reading something yesterday, this long news article. It was written by a computer. And it's unbelievable that what artificial intelligence can do. That's going to make if you go into more and more factories, what you're seeing is robotics handling the jobs, not real people. And it's going to increase the amount of goods and services. On the one hand, the second hand, it's kind of scary, right?
Yeah.
Because what are people going to do if the computers and the robots are doing all the work?
Well, are you I'm not as doom and gloom on this as some people. As you could go back 25 years. The internet was going to take away everybody's jobs. Look at what it's done. So I don't know how you feel. Now, there are people who will lose jobs due to this, but I mean, since the beginning of time, we've seen innovation just create jobs that we can't predict. Where are you at on that, Steve Moore?
Well, I think you just said it very well. I don't know if I can improve on that, but the whole course of history of civilization is, when we invented fire and we invented the wheel, modern manufacturing, we had the industrial age that began in the late 18th century that led to the kind of machinery that on their backs. We had trucks and things like that. But this is like warp speed faster. That's my point. It's like the Industrial Revolution times 10. Mm-hmm. And so it's just going to be what we have to do. I think you have to make sure that you're preparing for the jobs of the future. I mean, as I just said, right now, today in America, we have roughly about 2 drivers.
Yeah.
Well, 10 years from now, we're not going to have we'll have a quarter of that number of truck drivers. I've seen them. I don't know if you've seen them in Kansas City. You see them the other day. I saw a caravan of 5 trucks, almost like a train going down the highway, and there was one driver driving 5 trucks. So that's the kind of change that is coming. Now, productivity is producing more and more and more goods and services with fewer and fewer man hours. And this is the very definition of productivity, but it means that the kind of work that we will do as humans will be, more creative kinds of things and not drudgery.
Yeah, that's well said. Steve Moore, great stuff.
But
Thanks.
I hope, by the way, Pete, I hope we do not get rid of radio talk show hosts.
No, listen, I don't know how you're going to duplicate this level of insight and humor and perspective. I mean, there's no computer duplicating this. Maybe on the music side, I could see music radio, some guy
by the way, that's another one. I saw the other day that like 3 of the top 10 songs were generated by computers.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting, too.
Yeah, you're right about that. That's true. Very much AI on the music side. Great stuff there, Steve. I am not worried about getting duplicated, but you know what? If it happens, I'm going to call you for a gig, okay?
You got it, my friend. Take care.
Right.
Have a great happy President's Day.
You too there, Steve Moore. Happy President's Day. Great to have him on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM.